On the day of my wedding photo shoot, my adopted sister suddenly grabbed my veil and shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sister, aren't you the adopted daughter we sponsored? Why are you here? Today is the day I'm taking wedding photos with Luke. Aren't you making a laughingstock of the Luke group?" If it were before, I would have run away in tears. But unfortunately, I was reborn. I slapped Stella across the face. "Who are you to talk to me? What are you, and who are you taking wedding photos with Luke? Can you even bear the face of the Luke group?" "One." Stella stumbled back from my slap, her veil falling off. She covered her face and stared at me incredulously. "Scarlet. You're crazy. You dare to hit me? Do you know what you're doing?" I looked at this green tea bitch in front of me, anger still surging, my body trembling slightly. In my previous life, I was stolen by human traffickers when I was young and sold to a mountain village, which was Stella's home. When my parents found me, I learned that I was the only daughter of the noble Scarlet family. I felt sorry for Stella and worried that she would be treated like a cow or a horse by her patriarchal parents back in the mountain village, so I begged my parents to bring her home with me and make her my adopted sister. But unexpectedly, I was bringing a wolf into the house. Not only did she steal my fiancé, Luke, but she also constantly bullied me, eventually causing me to commit suicide due to depression. Reborn in this life, I would never be so foolish again. I calmly sat down, forcing myself to calm down, and pointed at her veil that had fallen to the ground, mockingly saying, "Stella, have you forgotten who you are? Are you even qualified to wear this wedding dress and pretend to be the future young mistress of the Luke group?" Stella's face changed, then she pretended to be calm, pointed at the bewildered saleswoman next to her, and shrieked. "Pretend? Ask them, who accompanied Luke to choose the wedding dress a few days ago." My heart sank. So, even when trying on the wedding dress, Luke had brought her first. He must have completely forgotten that the person who was supposed to take wedding photos with him today was me. After the saleswoman reacted, she quickly picked up the veil, carefully put it on Stella, and said sarcastically to me, "Who doesn't know that Mr. Luke has a beloved fiancée? You're so shameless to even try this. It's only because the young mistress of the Luke family is kind. If it were me, I would have kicked you, this ungrateful white-eyed wolf, out a long time ago." Stella raised her chin triumphantly and glanced at me contemptuously. "Scarlet, why don't you just go home and do your chores? Don't forget, it was agreed that our family would adopt you and sponsor your education, and you would have to work like a cow or a horse to repay us." At this time, the store manager of the wedding dress shop hurried over, saw the tense atmosphere, and quickly apologized to Stella with a smile. "Young mistress, what's wrong? Who made you angry?" I coldly watched this group of sycophants, and after a long while, I spoke up. "You call a fake young mistress? Does the Luke family know about this?" "You!" Stella's face turned pale, and she pointed at me and roared. "I dare you to make the Luke family kick you out." Dare? What was there to be afraid of when dealing with a wild duck? 2. As she spoke, she lunged forward to grab my phone, but I slapped her hand away with a loud slap. This sound was louder and clearer than the previous one. The store manager and the saleswomen froze in place, their faces filled with fear. Stella covered her rapidly swelling cheek and stared at me incredulously. "Scarlet! You! Aren't you afraid of Luke finding out you hit me?" I almost laughed out loud. I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you say you were going to call the police?" "I did call the police, so what are you afraid of?" I paused deliberately, my gaze sweeping across their panicked faces. "Even if Luke knows I hit you, so what? Does he own the Luke family now? He's just a spoiled brat, and I'm not afraid of him." The store manager came to her senses, supported Stella, and looked at me with curses, as if she were protecting some rare species. "You imposter! You dare to hit the young mistress of the Luke family! You're asking for it?" She turned to the saleswomen and shouted, "What are you standing there for? Call the police! Arrest this crazy woman!" Call the police? I sneered. I was the real fiancé of Luke. If I really called the police, the Luke family would be the ones who would be embarrassed. Let's see who would be more embarrassed then. Stella put on a pitiful act at this moment, covering her face and saying softly and weakly, "Forget it, today is the day Luke and I are taking wedding photos, and I don't want to ruin my mood because of her. Just kick her out." The store manager immediately understood, and she shouted at the front desk, "Security! Security! Throw this shameless bitch out!" Several burly security guards came over, but I remained seated as steady as a mountain, took out my phone, and flipped through a photo of Luke and me. In the photo, he was wrapping his arm around my waist, smiling brightly. I coldly scanned them and said, "I, Scarlet, am Luke's fiancée. If any of you dare to touch me, I'll see to it that this store is closed tomorrow." The security guards looked at each other, then at the photo, and then at me, none of them daring to step forward. The store manager snatched my phone away, looked at the photo carefully, then looked at Stella, whose face was pale, and spat contemptuously. "So you're just a mistress. A little fox spirit. Look at how arrogant you are. You took a photo with him and think you can climb the social ladder? Why don't you take a look at yourself in the mirror and see what you look like?" Stella still looked wronged and wiped away a tear. Our family just felt sorry for her and let her be our adopted daughter, but I never thought she would have designs on Luke. Alas, it's all my fault. I like to be kind to others, but I never thought. She paused, looked at me, and said provocatively, "A wild goose will always be a wild goose, and it can never become a phoenix." Sometimes I really admired her. She could actually scold herself so confidently while blaming others. I was too lazy to argue with them and directly called Luke, my voice cold. "I'm not taking the wedding photos today. And Stella, I don't want to see her again." On the other end of the phone, Luke seemed to have just realized that today was the day I had agreed to take wedding photos with him, and then his voice carried a hint of impatience. "What's wrong? Scarlet, what are you doing again?" Stella started crying. "Scarlet, Luke was kind enough to let you live with us in the Luke family, and later even treated you like a sister, but you constantly target me and want to be with Luke." Luke on the other end of the phone slowly uttered a few words. "I'll be right there." 3. Stella, knowing Luke was coming, didn't panic at all, but instead provocatively challenged. "Also, let Luke say it himself, who is his real fiancé?" I scoffed inwardly. How stupid I was back then to be played by them. In my previous life, Stella didn't tell me until the moment I died. "Your fiancé is really too tempting. I just wore your suspender to his room, and he couldn't resist." It turned out she had been secretly seducing Luke all along, and eventually became Luke's first love. Because I had been kidnapped when I was young and had lived a life of dependence on others, I cherished Stella, my sister, but she betrayed my trust and eloped with Luke when I was most unguarded. Luke had agreed to get engaged to me, but only for. Thinking of this, I quietly sent a message. After a while, Luke arrived panting. As soon as he entered, he saw Stella crying her eyes out, while I sat there with a cold expression. He walked quickly to me, his voice tinged with reproach. "Scarlet, go back first." The store manager finally breathed a sigh of relief. She smiled obsequiously. "Mr. Luke, thank goodness you're here, otherwise the young mistress would have been beaten to death by this little bitch. You have no idea how hard she hit." As she spoke, Stella covered the half of her face that I had swollen. "Luke!" Before I could speak, Stella threw herself into his arms and cried even louder. "Luke, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have come to try on the wedding dress, I shouldn't have." Watching them embrace, I felt disgusted. I sneered and interrupted Stella's hypocritical act. "You really shouldn't have come, after all, you're just an imposter." Luke's face instantly turned ugly. He looked at Stella, his eyes filled with pity and tenderness, and asked softly, "Stella, don't cry, I'll get her to leave." Stella's body trembled slightly. She looked up at Luke, looking pitiful, and asked in a choked voice, "Luke, tell me, who is the imposter?" Luke didn't even think about it. His disgusted gaze fell on me, and he coldly ordered, "Scarlet, are you leaving or not? I'm taking wedding photos with Stella today. This is not a place you can come." I laughed. In my previous life, he was still a little afraid of me. Now, after seeing Stella's few tears, he couldn't wait to break up with me. I smiled mockingly, my fingers tapping continuously on the leather sofa. "Are you sure you want me to leave? Luke, don't forget the favors our family has done for your family." Luke paused, slowly moved his gaze away, and held Stella's hand even tighter. "What Scarlet family? Now our Luke group doesn't need to rely on anyone. Since you're not giving up, then I'll say it again. I, Luke, only have one fiancée, Stella." From Luke's few words, who couldn't tell that I was the imposter? But he didn't care about the purpose of his initial approach to me and agreeing to marry me? Seeing that we didn't respond, the store manager pointed at me and roared angrily at the security guards. "What are you standing there for? Get this woman out." The security guards dared not be negligent and rolled up their sleeves and walked towards me. I looked at the time. It was the right day, and counting the time from the airport, it should be almost time. Just as the security guard's hand was about to touch me, a shout came from outside the door. "I'll see who dares to touch a hair on Scarlet." It was Luke's father, Uncle Ryan. He was here. When he heard Uncle Ryan's familiar yet slightly anxious voice, Luke was visibly flustered. His face changed and he stammered, "Dad? How did you get here?" Trying to mask his unease, he added calmly, "If you were coming, I would have picked you up. There was no need for you to come in person." I sneered inwardly. In my previous life, after I died, he had gone to great lengths to prevent Uncle Ryan from seeing me one last time. It seemed he was also guilty, knowing how much I meant to Uncle Ryan. Uncle Ryan's face was ashen, his gaze cutting like a knife as it swept over Luke and finally landed on Stella, who was just as at a loss. The store manager, perhaps stunned by the sudden turn of events, seemed not to have heard what Uncle Ryan had said. With a fawning smile, she stepped forward and showered Uncle Ryan with compliments. "Mr. Ryan is so fortunate to have such a beautiful and kind daughter-in-law. Mr. Luke has truly inherited your excellent genes, and is very handsome." Then, she glanced at me disdainfully and said sarcastically, "So, there are always some unscrupulous women who have to come and take advantage of the situation." Stella tugged at the store manager's sleeve, signaling her to stop, but the store manager completely misunderstood, and instead raised her voice and shouted, "The young mistress is just too kind. She's been bullied like this and still wants to let things go. If it were me." I smiled slightly, gently took Uncle Ryan's arm, and said calmly, "Uncle Ryan, I've been thinking, and I think I should break off the engagement with Luke." I paused, glanced at the gloating store manager, and added, "Also, this wedding dress shop, we're pulling out our investment." As soon as these words were said, the store manager was dumbfounded. She pointed at my hand on Uncle Ryan's arm, her lips trembled, and she couldn't say a complete word for a long time. Luke's face was terribly gloomy. He suppressed his anger and said, "Dad, Scarlet is just throwing a little tantrum. It's no big deal, you don't have to listen to her add fuel to the fire." Uncle Ryan took out his phone, and the screen was showing that he was on a call with me. "Do you think my old ears are deaf?" Stella hurriedly lowered her head and mumbled, "Uncle Ryan, it's not like that." Uncle Ryan frowned, interrupted her sternly, "Don't call me uncle, I don't know you." The store manager finally reacted, her face turned pale, she staggered back a few steps, and stammered, This. Then, as if she had grasped a life-saving straw, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Miss Scarlet. Young mistress. I was wrong. I was deceived. It was she who impersonated you and deceived me." I ignored her and looked directly at Luke, my tone calm and resolute. "Luke, it's over between us, I won't marry you." Uncle Ryan was so angry that he trembled all over, picked up the vase on the table and smashed it at Luke's feet. The sound of the vase shattering was clear and piercing. "You bastard! If it weren't for your Uncle Iden saving me and your mother back then, you wouldn't have been born. The group wouldn't be where it is today. I'm telling you. I, Ryan, only recognize Scarlet as my daughter-in-law. If you insist on marrying that Stella, then I'll cut off our father-son relationship and adopt Scarlet as my daughter." After saying that, he left without looking back. Before leaving, he looked at his assistant, waved his hand, and said in an unquestionable tone, "This store, cancel the cooperation. We won't invest in any of their projects." 5. On the way back to Luke's house, Uncle Ryan kept looking at me, wanting to say something but hesitating. I guessed what he wanted to say. It was probably something about guilt. Luke's being a jerk didn't mean Uncle Ryan was a bad person. Since my parents passed away, he had taken me back to the Luke family and treated me like his own daughter, and I knew that in my heart. I took the initiative to break the awkward silence in the car. "Uncle Ryan, you don't have to feel guilty. You raised me and I'm very grateful. Even if I can't be your daughter-in-law, I can still be your goddaughter. And it should be me who apologizes. I shouldn't have brought Stella back to the Luke family with me." When Uncle Ryan heard this, he suddenly smiled, and the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes relaxed. "That bastard, he really doesn't know how to cherish," I thought. Right. My parents had left me a fortune of hundreds of millions when they died, and I could only withdraw it on my 24th birthday. Now, my 24th birthday was less than a month away, and that was exactly why Luke had agreed to marry me. In my previous life, I was foolishly deceived by him, and after I died, Stella impatiently took over my identity and status as an adopted daughter, while Luke inherited my hundreds of millions of dollars. This life, I would not repeat the same mistakes. Back at the Luke family villa, I asked Uncle Ryan to go to rest first, but he was so angry that he couldn't rest. He directly ordered the butler, "Throw Stella's things out. I want to see it done, not a single thing left." I shook my head and went straight back to the room I had lived in for 10 years, thinking, "It's time to move out." I started packing my things, and just as I was about to turn around, I bumped into a wall of flesh. Luke stood at the door with a face full of anger, grabbed my wrist and said, "Scarlet, what do you think you are? How dare you treat me like this?" I sneered, forcefully shook off his hand. "Luke, you better figure it out. Now you're the one who can't afford me." He was enraged by me and raised his hand to hit me. I met his gaze fearlessly, my eyes full of contempt, but his hand stopped in mid-air and did not fall. He knew he dared not hit me. Uncle Ryan wouldn't let him. After a moment, he seemed to be suppressing his anger, and his tone began to calm down. "Scarlet, you know, Stella is sensitive. She just envies you and wants to experience what it's like to take wedding photos. I'm not going to marry her, so don't be angry." I shrugged, my tone casual. "Not angry, you can take pictures with whoever you want, just take hundreds of sets, take them until the end of time." Luke was so choked by me that his face turned red. "Scarlet! You used to be so gentle. Why are you so vicious today?" "Vicious?" I pointed out of the window. There was a pile of Stella's things on the lawn, like a pile of garbage. "Those things, aren't they familiar?" "Right, I have everything, and I bought the same thing for Stella. Isn't it just that you can't bear to see her suffer? You love her so much, so don't bark like a dog in front of me. I find it very embarrassing." "You!" Luke's veins popped out on the back of his hand. "Scarlet! I've been so humble to you, and you still don't appreciate it. Before you came back, all this originally belonged to Stella. You, as the real daughter, always bully her. Is that interesting?" Speaking of which, he took out his phone and showed a photo, in which I was embracing a man. Stella told me, you always like to flirt outside. Since you can, why can't I? I haven't even disdained you for being dirty, but you're so high and mighty. Just this? I raised an eyebrow. I thought you had something real. Just with this photo, you want to smear me? Luke, you underestimate me too much. I turned to leave, but he shouted loudly behind me. Scarlet! I won't cancel our engagement. You can only marry me. Before he could finish, Uncle Ryan kicked him hard from behind. You bastard! Scarlet is the only real daughter. The only heir. If we marry the Scarlet family, our group can get bigger and bigger. You bastard! 6. Listening to these words, I felt no waves in my heart. To be honest, I didn't care about any family marriage. At first, I really thought Luke liked me. After packing my things, I suddenly remembered something and quietly slipped into Luke's room, taking out the mini camera I had placed on his bedside table. Actually, I put it there in my previous life. I originally planned to secretly film the moment he proposed to me. Unexpectedly, I clutched the camera tightly and walked out of the villa with my suitcase, and ran into Luke, who was coming back with Stella. I didn't want to pay any attention to him and walked straight past him, but Stella started crying, and if you didn't know better, you'd think I had bullied her. She sobbed. Scarlet, aren't you very good at pretending to be kind? Why aren't you pretending now? You know very well that Luke and I truly love each other, but you still use such a clumsy way to force him to give in. Do you have a heart? I stopped and looked at her with a mocking smile. Pretending? Now that I'm leaving, are you still feeling wronged? Now that I'm letting you have him, shouldn't you be kneeling on the ground and thanking me? Luke pulled Stella behind him, as if I were some kind of monster. Scarlet! Stella came to apologize to you. Don't be so unreasonable. Apologize? That sarcastic sneer, and you call it an apology? I almost laughed out loud. Seeing that I wasn't speaking, he thought I had softened, and his tone became stronger. Go tell my dad that you and Stella have made up, and let Stella come back to live here. I spat. A good dog doesn't get in the way. Get lost. After leaving Luke's villa, I sent a message to Uncle Ryan. Uncle Ryan, what if Luke troubles me? Uncle Ryan replied quickly. Do as you please, don't worry about me, his little tricks can't affect the Luke group. Uncle Ryan still understood me. When I returned to the villa where my parents used to live, I found out that Uncle Ryan had already arranged for people to tidy up for me overnight. It seemed he had already anticipated that I would leave Luke's house. I took a shower and lay down on the soft bed, feeling completely relaxed. Picking up my phone, my name was at the top of the hot search list. Luke's adopted daughter looks down on people and bullies Sale's fake daughter arrogant and domineering. Engagement with Luke family cancelled. Luke master abandons orphan Scarlet to love first love. There were so many topics, I didn't know which one to click on first. I clicked in one by one and glanced at the black and white reports. I was completely unfazed. The wedding dress shop lost Luke's investment, and its partners also withdrew their investment. The store manager was fired. All this was within my expectations. Stella, that delicate little white flower, is good at using these despicable means. Clicking into the main article, it was a video that had been maliciously edited. In the video, I looked ferocious, and I was venting my anger at the store manager, completely a unreasonable shrew. The comment section was even more lively, filled with insults and ridicule towards me. Ah. This is just the adopted daughter of the Luke family. Does she really think she's a young lady? Why don't you take a look at yourself in the mirror? This woman looks so mean, she's definitely a scheming bitch. Taking advantage of being adopted by the Luke family, she has a little money and bullies people. It's disgusting. The beauty is wearing a wedding dress, and she still goes to make trouble, forcing her to take off her clothes. Isn't this bullying? I suggest sending her in. If I were Mr. Luke, I would choose the gentle one too. This woman will sooner or later cause trouble in the Luke family. Marrying her home is a disaster. Where is the public relations department of the Luke group? How are you going to deal with such a disgusting thing? I curled my lips and sneered. These comments were simply childishly ridiculous. Stella's methods could only fool these ignorant netizens. 7. I took a few screenshots and sent them to Uncle Ryan. Uncle Ryan, look, isn't your future daughter-in-law's methods quite clever? Uncle Ryan replied instantly. Scarlet, don't be angry, Uncle has already arranged for someone to handle it. I replied with an okay emoji, then clicked on another topic. #Luke the young master abandoned the orphan girl. Scarlet had met your first love. In this topic, netizens' comments about Stella were polar opposites. This young lady is so beautiful and gentle. This is what a young lady should look like. She's so much better than that poison woman. Mr. Luke has such good taste. This is a perfect match. Bless them. That vicious woman deserves to be abandoned. I feel sorry for our beauty. I felt like vomiting. Stella is really good at pretending. She clearly stole my fiancé, but now she has become the victim and won everyone's sympathy. I was about to exit Weibo when I suddenly received a private message. I clicked on it, and it was a strange number. Miss Scarlet, I know you have been wronged, and I have evidence to prove that Stella is the real mastermind behind this. If you want to clear your name, please contact me. I raised an eyebrow and immediately replied. Where are you? Let's meet and talk. The other party quickly replied with an address. I changed my clothes, put on sunglasses and a mask, and drove to the agreed location. The meeting place was a hidden cafe. After a while, a woman wearing a black windbreaker and a baseball cap walked in hurriedly, looking around. She walked straight to me, took off her hat. It turned out to be the saleswoman from the wedding dress shop. Miss Scarlet, hello. My name is Luna. I looked her up and down. She had helped Stella bully me a lot that day, so I asked bluntly. What evidence do you have? Luna took a document out of her bag and handed it to me. This is a record of Stella and the store manager's private transaction, and there is also evidence that she instructed the Water Army to smear you online. I took the document and quickly browsed through it. This evidence was enough to ruin Stella. Why are you helping me? I looked at her with inquiring eyes. Luna's eyes were red and she choked. Because I can't lose my job. I don't want to be like the store manager. No one in a city wants me. I took the document Luna handed me and didn't say anything to thank her. It's more practical to give direct benefits than hypocritical politeness. Do one more thing for me. I took a U-disc out of my bag, put it on the table and pushed it towards her. Luna's eyes lit up, and she quickly stuffed the U-disc into her pocket, nodding repeatedly. Miss Scarlet, don't worry, I'll definitely do it. Her eager look, as if she was afraid that I would go back on my word. Where was the grievance and fear she had just now? She was completely a fence-sitter. I sneered. I've seen people like her a lot. Leaving the cafe, I called Uncle Ryan and briefly told him the situation, and by the way mentioned the U-disc. Uncle Ryan laughed on the other end of the phone, his tone full of pampering. Scarlet, just do whatever you want. That's what Luke deserves. Since Uncle Ryan said so, I let go. The next day, the wind direction of Weibo took a 180-degree turn. The hot search that had been scolding me all over the sky yesterday magically disappeared, and instead, the news of #group master Lukeating with a fake daughter firmly occupied the top of the hot search list. 8. I clicked on it, and it was the surveillance video from Luke's room. In the video, he and Stella were rolling around in bed. Although the picture was pixelated, the sound was clear and audible. The unbearable groans and Stella's sickeningly sweet panting were simply ear-splitting. Stella's voice was sweet and dripping. Luke, can I be your wife? Let me be the young mistress of the group. Luke's voice was low and hoarse, with a hint of impatience. Stella, don't rush. Let me marry Scarlet first and get all her inheritance, then I'll find a way to drive her away and marry you. That Scarlet is so stupid, she always thinks I love her. This video was simply solid evidence. In just 10 minutes, the meaning was self-evident. The netizens who were scolding me yesterday suddenly turned their backs, and the comment section exploded. What? The plot has reversed. It turns out that these two are the disgusting ones. So shameless. It turns out she was the mistress. The real victim was smeared by her online. What Luke group? Bah! I will definitely boycott their products in the future. I feel sorry for the real owner. Being bullied by such a scumbag and bitch. I sneered in my heart. Stella, how does it feel? Taking advantage of this wave of heat, I released the unedited version of the video from the wedding dress shop, as well as the evidence of her bribing the store manager to smear me. Netizens felt even more cheated by Stella. They not only found her personal information, but also dug up her previous promiscuous experiences. One photo looked familiar. Isn't this the original photo where she slandered me and another man hugging each other? It turned out it was herself. It was just that my face was photoshopped onto it. I sent the original photo directly to Luke, but Luke never replied. Perhaps he was really in love. For a time, Stella's carefully crafted image of a pure and innocent little white flower collapsed. After that, the Luke group was caught in a scandal. Fortunately, Uncle Ryan had always felt that Luke was not mature and stable enough, so he had not allowed him to take up a position in the company. Apart from the impact on its image, the stock price of the Luke group was not affected too much. But Luke and Stella were scolded badly and dared not even go out. I thought they would restrain themselves, but a few days later, Stella came to my door with several mean women carrying red paint, shouting loudly, "Bitch! Get out here! It's all your fault. You made Luke and I lose face. Get out of here. Tell the netizens that you are jealous of us. You are the little mistress. I'm telling you. I'm pregnant. The young mistress of the Luke family can only be me." I calmly stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and posted this scene to the Luke family group. Uncle Ryan was furious and said directly, "We don't have such a wild child in our family." Luke immediately called me and said, "Scarlet, I didn't know she would come to find you. I'll send her away right now. I promise you, she won't appear in front of you again." A few days ago, he had a disgusted attitude towards me, but today he was so humble. It must be that Uncle Ryan had told him something, so he remembered my hundreds of millions of inheritance. After hanging up the phone, I sat down with interest and watched Stella pour bucket after bucket of paint all over my yard. The women behind her were even more arrogant. This beauty said, "Pour a bucket and we'll give you 500. Pour hard." After a while, Luke arrived. He didn't even look at Stella and pulled her out. Stella broke free and questioned him. "Luke, didn't you say you loved me very much? Why can she live in such a big villa, but I can't? What's so good about her? Why does your father like her so much?" Luke let go of her hand. He knew how to answer these questions, but he didn't want to say. Stella turned around and saw me walking out of the door. She became even angrier. "You finally came out. Get out of here. From now on, my son will belong to the Luke family, and everything in the Luke family will belong to me. Don't dirty the land of the Luke family here." 9. I smiled and looked at Luke. "Since he won't say it, then I'll say it. This land under your feet belongs to me, Scarlet, not the Luke family. You're clearly my family's adopted daughter, but you don't even know this. It seems that my parents didn't love you at all before they died. Also, the personal assets my parents left me are many times more than Luke's. Otherwise, why do you think he didn't dare to hit me for you?" "Enough!" Luke stared at Stella with bloodshot eyes. "Are you trying to annoy me even more? Why don't you just leave?" Stella looked at him in disbelief. "I'm pregnant with your child. And you're still speaking up for her. What's so good about her? If she hadn't come back to take it away, it would all be mine." But Luke pushed her away and showed me the original photo he had sent me. "Who knows if it's my child or not? You get out of here. As far as you can go. Get out. How could you let you go so easily after causing trouble on my territory?" As soon as I said that, a siren sounded, and several police officers in uniform walked in. Who called the police? I raised my hand and played the video of Stella hiring people to pour paint on me. Police officer, I want to accuse her of trespassing and intentionally damaging other people's property. Speaking of which, I also took out the photos she had photoshopped and the originals. By the way, she also made up rumors about me and slandered me. I'll report all of these together. Stella didn't expect this to be my home, and she didn't expect me to actually call the police. She was immediately panicked and tugged at Luke's sleeve. Luke, I was just too nervous. The police looked at the video in my hand and looked at Stella. Come back with us. Hearing this, Stella blushed and scolded. Open your eyes and see who I am. I'm the young mistress of the Luke group. How dare you take me back? The police frowned. No matter who you are, if you break the law, you have to come back with us. Luke suddenly looked at me, then turned to look at Stella, and said coldly, Stella has nothing to do with the Luke group, don't talk nonsense. Luke. Stella was stunned for a moment, her eyes were red. What are you saying? How can it have nothing to do with me? The child in my belly is the only seed of your Luke family. At this time, Uncle Ryan hurried over, and he scolded as he walked. I said he was a bastard, and he was a bastard. What does it have to do with us? Stella angrily took out a pregnancy test report from her bag. Look at this. It's your son's seed. I will also do a DNA test after the child is born. Until you admit it. Uncle Ryan suddenly laughed, and he pointed at Luke and said, He's not even my biological son. How can your son be the seed of our Luke family? As soon as these words came out, it was like a bolt from the blue. I only found out about this now. Luke was very calm. It seemed he had known for a long time. Luke choked and said, Dad, you won't forget our father-son relationship just for this little thing, even if we're not biologically related. I grew up watching you. Uncle Ryan frowned and said, Half a year before your mother married me, she was raped and pregnant with you. I felt sorry for her and felt guilty for not protecting her well, so I was willing to fulfill my marriage contract with her. My wife and I were in a car accident when we were on a business trip. If it weren't for the Scarlet family who saved us, we wouldn't be where we are today. I watched you grow up since I was a child, and I treated you as my own son, but you are so unpromising. You have such a good Scarlet, but you don't want her. You want such a disgusting woman. Stella shook her head violently. What do you mean? You're actually the son of a rapist. Hearing this, Luke couldn't bear it anymore, grabbed her wrist and pushed her towards the fountain. Say it again. Stella didn't stand firm and fell into the fountain. This fountain was chosen by me, and there were countless water holes in it. She was also wearing high heels, and she fell and rolled in no time. The police hurried to pull her up, but she screamed, My stomach! In an instant, the entire fountain turned red. Uncle Ryan shook his head. Luke, Scarlet and I have given you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. Then he said to the police, Do whatever you need to do. After the two of them were taken away by the police, I looked at the pool and sighed. What a beautiful fountain, it's ruined. Half a month later, I successfully inherited the hundreds of millions of dollars left by my parents, and I also recognized Uncle Ryan as my godfather. Uncle Ryan ruthlessly kicked Luke out of the Luke family and let him fend for himself. In the end, Luke was sentenced to 2 years for intentional injury, and his future was ruined. I was the real daughter, and everything else was just floating clouds.